got the cornfield calm, Midwest tone, but he's spitting facts like a dog with a bone. Lanky frame, fire-haired, eyes on the case, breaking down the game and the darkest place. Sports scores to murder boards, Hoosier logic cuts like swords. From Friday lights to chalked out lines, this redhead's brain rewrites the lines inside the Hoosier mind, where the stories twist and stats unwind. He's a legend in flannel, mic in hand, digging deep where few can stand. From touchdowns to crime scenes raw, he's got the truth in every draw. Yeah, step in if you dare to find what's brewing inside the Hoosier mind. He'll talk Pacers, Colts, or Colts on trial. Hoosier humor with a devilish smile. He's that redhead sleuth with a box of clues, takes your headline, breaks the news. With every stat and every scream, he's painting portraits in your stream. Don't blink, he'll tie it tight. From game night wins to murder flight. Inside the Hoosier mind, where the facts hit hard and the lines are blind. He's a ginger ninja, sleuth and slick, cracking cases play by play quick. From courtrooms to the hardwood floor, he digs for more than just the score. Tune in and don't rewind, you're deep now inside the Hoosier mind.
All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome in to Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you in part by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice, and most importantly, letting veterans' voices be heard. We are back. College football is back. It is officially the end of week 1, and we had everything you could have hoped for and more from the first week of college football. We had upsets, we had surprises, we had everything that you can imagine. We had ups. We had top 10 teams lose. Of course, we had bottom 25 lose. Nobody's really surprised about that. But nonetheless, though, the great thing that is college football is back, and it's not going away until January. And that means I have shows planned for the entire rest of the year and the beginning of next year. And I am super excited. So let's dive into it. First and foremost of everything, I'm going to cover some of the big games. I won't cover all the games, but I am going to cover some of the big games that happened with college football this past weekend. I actually did do some picks, and I went 6-5 in my picks just because of a few of the upsets. I definitely thought that Texas was going to be Ohio State. That ended up not coming to fruition, unfortunately. I ended up actually picking I picked Alabama to, potentially beat Florida State. They were 13.5-point favorites. That was wrong. But I did get lucky due to my faithfulness to LSU, because I picked LSU over Clemson, ended up being right, even though for anybody who watches LSU, if you're an LSU fan, they're kind of the cardiac cats. They'll keep you just at that brink of anxiety and just trying not to have a heart attack constantly. But they stay in the game and they keep you just right there. They ended up winning, and was just overall super excited about it. So let's start with the first game that happened on Friday night with Auburn at Baylor. This one I actually picked incorrectly. I originally had Baylor winning this just because I didn't know how well Jackson Arnold was going to do with this new system in Auburn, and he ended up running all over them. He was actually Auburn's leading rusher with 137 yards. Sawyer Robinson for Baylor looked absolutely fantastic. He had 419 passing yards and a 38-24 defeat. So, I mean, he was great. Now, it was a lot of that garbage time yards, more than likely at the end. But that was a great game. It was a great game on Auburn's side. It was a great game on Baylor's side. The fact that Auburn was able to run all over Baylor was really surprising. I know a few of the Auburn fans that I have at work and even in a group chat that I'm in are super excited about this Auburn team. This is actually what they were wanting last year as far as production goes, and they're happy that they finally got it this year. So I was really surprised at how well this went as a whole, and congrats to the Auburn Tigers being able to get their first win. The other big game of Friday night that I was really impressed with was Georgia Tech, Colorado. I really wanted to see what this Colorado team looked like post Deion Sanders. Shedeur Sanders has gone to the NFL. Travis Hunter has gone to the NFL. Shiloh Sanders has also gone to the NFL. What does this team look like now as Deion as the head coach? Because we haven't seen him as a head coach, even at Jackson State, both, all 2 years at Colorado so far, entering his third. We haven't seen what he looks like without his sons being there. So now we got a chance to see that with Kendon Slater as the primary quarterback for them. On offense, they looked fast. And for anybody who watched the game, it wasn't exactly the sexiest game. They didn't really highlight it or promote it as being one of the sexiest matchups. If you watch the game, they looked incredibly fast on offense. Defense is still a little bit of a question. Total yardage wise, I mean, they had 305 total yards. And really what stood out the most is Georgia Tech gave the ball away 3 times within the beginning of the game, and I thought, okay, they're giving Colorado this game. If Colorado doesn't capitalize, I'm going to be really surprised. And they honestly didn't. They weren't really heavily penalized. They were fairly efficient on third down, a little less than 50%. They were perfect on fourth down. They lost the time of possession battle. And overall, they kept it close. The last couple of minutes, as far as their timing, is what was really weird. He didn't want to call a timeout. I don't really know why he didn't want to do that. They had about 1:07 left to at least go down and, be in scoring position to maybe give themselves a chance. And for whatever reason didn't take that opportunity. So it was a little weird. I did trust Georgia Tech, however, with Haynes King, who, by the way, passing wise, not really the sexiest, but I mean, the kid can run. He had 143 passing yards. He's 13-21 pick, but he had 19 carries for 156 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns as a result of it. So, I mean, he gives them that element of having that dual threat quarterback because he can do a little bit of both. I do think he relies a little bit too much on his legs than what he probably should. But overall, this was actually a better game than what I expected, and hopefully better than what a lot of maybe other people expected to come out of at least week 1. Especially for an ACC versus Big 12 matchup. And I know a lot of people aren't exactly high on Georgia Tech. They had a pretty good year last year. They started out really well, upsetting Florida State over in Ireland, and kind of stayed up there. And then they unfortunately kind of came back down to earth. Still had a very positive season, but good on them for being able to go on the road in Colorado, get a first win. And it'll be interesting to see what adjustments Deion Sanders makes and what this Colorado team looks like as the season moves forward in a conference that, all honesty, the conference as a whole looks solid. And again, everybody is kind of in the same boat. I do have somebody that I want to throw out there for my personal opinion, I think is going to make the Big 12 championship. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Let's talk about the big matchups that happened on Saturday, though. You had Texas at Ohio State. Ohio State ends up winning 14-7. Arch, I know the big story, Arch Manning did not exactly look great in his, Texas debut on the road at the Shoe. He was, I believe, 17-30. He's 170 yards, 1 touchdown and a pick. And if you watch some of the game film too, there was a few throws that they're blaming him for, and I get it. He's the one doing the throwing. He truly is what drives the offense as a whole. Some of the throws I've seen other wide receivers make, and I've seen them make in other circumstances. I think for some of them, like a couple of the last throws in the last drive, that honestly, I thought he was going to drive him down there and at least score or get him in position to. Didn't know if he was going to be able to have that drive to get there, but he did get them close. There's a couple just bad throws. One of them was just behind the receiver. It hit him in his gloved hand. He drops it, and then the other one he completely missed him. So I'll say this about Arch because I know a lot of people were ready to be out on him. Keep in mind, they did this on purpose. And what I mean by that is you have to think about it. He was a 5-star prospect. He's a Manning. He has Peyton in his ear. He has Eli in his ear. He has his grandfather Arch. He has his dad Cooper. He has all of them in his ear. He has a ton of experience that is available to him as far as resources goes, and guys that have all been in that same situation, and they're trying to prepare him as best as possible. And realistically, they've prepared him for this his entire life. I mean, you have to think, if you're a boy in the Manning family, more than likely this is what you're going to go for, and this is what you're going to do. And for him coming into this moment, I don't think the pressure was too big, but I do think for starters, it's the first game of the season. There's not of a whole you don't really get to make a lot of your adjustments until after the game is over. Yes, you can make halftime adjustments. We saw it did look a little bit better. I mean, the offense did start to get a little bit of a groove. That's when Texas finally scored, was in the second half of the game. But nonetheless, you really can't make those fixes until after the game is already over. I'm not out on Arch Manning. I think he did. I'm not going to say he did solid for his first debut. I do think everybody needs to give him a little bit more of a chance, though. That's my big thing. Come back in about 5 or 6 weeks. We'll see what he looks like as they gear up to go into conference play. Obviously, they have a few cupcakes built in there. Now their next big one, as far as getting into conference in the SEC, they have to go on the road to the Swamp in Florida, in Gainesville. Then we'll get to see. Honestly, it'll probably be one of the best matchups, because we get to see what does Florida look like against a power school. Is DJ Lagway still going to be probably one of the Heisman contenders, one of the dark horse threats that Florida was last year as far as beating people and keeping them in contention when a lot of people didn't think they were going to be in contention? And is Arch finally able to have a bounce back game? Hey, you're going to probably be able to beat up the cupcakes. You're going to have a really good time. Does that correlate over then into a big game against a big time opponent like Florida? We'll have to wait and see. We had the other quote unquote big game that was probably more of the shocker more than anything. We had Saturday afternoon's game of Alabama at Florida State. Florida State shocking Alabama with a 31-17 win. Tommy Castellanos talked all that smack throughout the offseason in Alabama. We saw all the interviews. Alabama kept saying noted. We're gonna take care of this. That's gonna be taken care of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They looked slow. Alabama looked slow. They looked confused. And I know a lot of Alabama fans are not happy with Kalen DeBoer. And I get it. I'll say this. And Cam Newton brought this up on his podcast on 4th and Goal. It's hard for coaches who have never coached in the SEC to then come in and try to meet those same expectations for a lot of these SEC teams. It's even more difficult when you're following in the footsteps of one of the greatest coaches in college football history, in Nick Saban. You're following behind a guy who, for the last almost 20 years, Alabama fans and most SEC fans have been used to. Alabama at minimum goes to the SEC championship. Alabama goes to the national title. And they either win both or they win at least one. Usually they win the SEC and then they go on to win the Natty, or they at least make an appearance in the Natty. And they do that pretty regularly and pretty frequently. And I know they've talked about how ever since that Georgia game, I believe they've gone 5-5 or 6-4, one of the two. They have like right at 500 or just above a 500 record against non-ranked FBS teams. And that's not the Alabama standard that we're used to. The fact that you took Georgia, you were up on them the entire time, all the way up until halftime. Then outside of the half, Georgia started to make a little bit of a comeback, and then you dash those hopes. Everything's good. The very next week, you get beat by Vanderbilt, and then the tumbling and the spiraling is just continued from there. If I'm an Alabama fan, here's what I'll say. You almost have to lower your expectations. And what I mean by that is I don't think Alabama's going to be one of these, 5-7, 6-6, 7-5 type teams. I think you're going to have to be used to the reality of you have a floor of about 8-4, maybe 9-3, and a ceiling of about 10-2, maybe 11-1 on a really good year. I don't think the years of going undefeated, I don't think the years of automatically all but being guaranteed a spot in the SEC championship, I don't think those are in Bama's future. I mean, again, with what Nick Saban was able to do, the Alabama brand will always be a massive recruiting effort and will always be there for Alabama. You'll always have the ability to say, look at who we are as Alabama. Look at who we've produced over the years. We had Amari Cooper. We had Julio Jones. We had Jerry Jeudy. We had Devontae Smith. We've had all of these big time players just at wide receiver. That's not even including all the defensive players that Alabama has had over the years that have made massive impacts both collegiately and professionally. That will always be available to them as far as what they've been able to do in the past, the NIL deals, the brand itself, the recognition, the national stage prestige and whatnot. But I think the really big years of Alabama absolutely dominating, Alabama being able to run through everything. And honestly, depending on if Auburn is truly able to strike, if Hugh Freeze doesn't absolutely drop the ball, which I think Hugh Freeze might, this might be the chance where Auburn is finally able to really compete in the state of Alabama for Alabama recruits and to keep them from going to the University of Alabama, all honesty. So, I mean, that's at least my take on Alabama. On Florida State, hats off to Mike Norvell. He went and got him a quarterback that, I think Castellanos is a fairly decent passer, but the fact that he is a dual threat running back. One of the fans on the Paul Feinbaum show actually brought up a really good point of the fact that because they brought in two new coordinators and Gus Malzahn and I think Tony White is the other guy's name, Alabama was not prepared. They don't know what a Gus Malzahn scheme looks like. They don't know what a Tony White scheme looks like with these players that they have. They also were very particular about what they went out and got in the transfer portal when it comes to the trenches, when it comes to the lines of, look, we're going to get guys that not only have experience, they have experience going up against these type of players and against this type of team, but we're also looking for these type of players that have experience and are going to be able to be flexible to do what we want them to do in our scheme to make it successful and make it work. And that's absolutely what Florida State was able to do. And they were able to take a huge advantage and a huge win from it. So I'm extremely impressed with Florida State for being able to pull out this win when absolutely nobody expected it. Like I said, they were one of my upset picks, unfortunately, that ultimately ended up getting me. But again, hats off to Florida State for being able to do that, for being able to kind of defy the odds more than anything. It's beyond impressive. I'll say that. The other one, my favorite game that again kept me anxious all night long. But my favorite game by far, LSU versus Clemson in Clemson's quote unquote Death Valley. For anybody who's just listening to this, I'm putting that in air quotes of Death Valley. It's not the real Death Valley. The real Death Valley is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. LSU comes in. I'll be honest, as an LSU fan, there was a ton of questions. The biggest one being, what does that defense look like? Offensively, there's a chance. They needed to fix the run game. The biggest question on offense, how do they replace a lot of the offensive linemen that they lost? They lost a couple to the transfer portal. The biggest one they lost was Will Campbell to the NFL. He gets drafted by the Patriots, absolute stud. How do they replace that? Where do they go? As well as what do they do as far as the run game goes? They had a massive ton of injuries last year, and it was essentially running back by committee. Caden Durham is great. He's a fantastic running back, but he was hurt a lot last year, so he wasn't able to do a whole lot. But LSU comes in, and for the most part, they're able to really handle a very good Clemson defense, which, I heard this a lot throughout the week, and I was watching a lot of shows, and it was kind of funny. You kind of see some of the bias with some of these networks, like the ACC network, as they were talking about the showdown. They talked about how pretty much everything that the two hosts favored went to Clemson, except for one. The other host did say that he liked Garrett Nussmeier a little bit more than he liked Cade Klubnik, which is fine. That's just personal preference. But it was just funny how they immediately were like, all the skill positions, Clemson, offensive line, Clemson, defense, Clemson, quarterback, Clemson, all of these things are Clemson. And it was just funny. I'm like, why are you counting LSU out? Because again, on paper, and I know I'm going to say this and people are going to criticize me for it. On paper, LSU looked just as good, if not better. And again, to me, it was one of those, when I looked at the overall betting line and I looked at the game, to me, it was a coin flip. I could have honestly gone either way when I was looking at it. I kind of felt the same way when I first picked Texas versus Ohio State. I felt like it could have gone either way. In all honesty, it wasn't that far off from going that way. LSU versus Clemson was a little different because it ultimately, LSU had a couple times where they had the game won. I will say in the first half, it was a little bit of a worry because you could see the 2 fumbles that the LSU wide receivers had to Clemson. And I thought, okay, man, if they're able to capitalize on this, this is not going to be pretty if this happens. And they were able to only capitalize, I believe, on one. They were able to get a touchdown from it, which not exactly the greatest, but it works more than anything. Because I mean, it could have gone a whole lot worse. The first one, I believe they only ended up actually doing a field goal out of it, so it wasn't the end of the world by no stretch of the imagination. The other thing, I mean, LSU's defense came in, and that was another big question for a lot of Tiger fans over the last couple of years: is what does this defense look like? They have a great pass rusher in Harold Perkins Jr. He was hurt last year. He got hurt in the UCLA game. He was out the rest of the year. But there's been a lot of questions. Why don't they utilize Harold Perkins better than what they have in the past? They were finally able to utilize him. They utilized him properly in this defensive scheme, and he absolutely wreaked havoc. The thing that really surprised me with Clemson, their lack of adjustments. And what I mean by that is offensively, they didn't really run the ball. And I mean, LSU's defense was all over them. They made Clemson's offensive line very shaky. There's a lot of questions now about Clemson's offensive line. And I know Clemson lost one of their big time wide receivers through this game too. But they didn't make any adjustments to try to help that. They abandoned the run game in the second half. I think they only had like 31 yards of rushing total throughout the rest of the game. They just completely quit running the ball. On the other side of it, even defensively, as good as Clemson's defense is, they didn't make any adjustments. LSU ran the same screenplay 4 times, the exact same play, line up everything like to the exact same player. Clemson did not move. They did not make any adjustments, and they just kept letting it happen. And it was weird. And there's even a few people, they kind of looked at it and said, this team doesn't look like this team kind of looks like the teams of past. Like they're going to be like, if everybody else is here, Clemson's going to be, just underneath that. They're going to beat teams that they're more talented than, they're better than. So they're probably going to have a pretty easy path as far as going through the ACC goes. The only real tough opponent they have to face in the ACC, at least up to potentially the ACC championship, is Florida State. And that's really it. I mean, you do have to go to Georgia Tech. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily worried about that. I definitely think they have more offensive and defensive firepower than Georgia Tech does. But I mean, other than that, okay, cool. You're probably going to go to the ACC championship. Then who are you going to face? Are you going to face a Miami who got a big win over Notre Dame? Are you going to face a Florida State who is probably going to be rolling for a hot minute after beating the Tide? Is SMU going to be included in that conversation again? They kind of snuck up pretty easily last year into the conference titles. So I mean, there's a lot of possibilities and there's a lot of questions. But I mean, overall, I was happy that LSU ended up pulling out the victory and finally break a streak of 0-5 in season openers. Last time they won an opening game was actually when they won the year they won the national title. Not saying that's going to happen again. I'm just saying that was the last time they were able to do as such. One of the other games that I didn't really get to catch, I watched some of the highlights and I thought was really good. And I think, and this is actually that Big 12 team that I was talking about earlier, Utah at UCLA. So we got to see the debut of Nico Iamaleava. I think it's Iamaleava. If I butchered that, I 100% apologize. Utah versus UCLA. Utah has a different quarterback now other than Cam Rising. It's Devin Dampierre. He's about 5'11". He's a little over 200 pounds. He's a short, stocky kid, but man, does he have a cannon for an arm. And the highlights that I watched, he was able to move them down the field really well. He had to jump a little bit to make some of the deep throws, but he did absolutely fantastic for the Utes. And I mean, this is a team that experience-wise, they've had a ton of great players. They're very well coached with Kyle Whittingham. They have a defense that's experienced. They have an offense that's experienced. The biggest thing that's hurt them the last couple of years has been injuries. Injuries and inconsistent quarterback play, and that's really what hurt them last year. I think this year, now albeit is against UCLA, so I'm not gonna sit here and say they're gonna run the table by no means. But I think Utah is good enough that they're going to make a Big 12 championship appearance, and I think they're going to be able to compete. And I think they even make the CFP, the college football playoffs. Now, I don't know how well they go, and I don't know how far they go in it. But overall, I mean, I thought that game, being able to drop 43 on UCLA on the road with a new system, new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, new all of it, I thought they did absolutely great. And I mean, defensively, to hold UCLA and Nico to 10 points, that's, again, pretty impressive. Now, on the other side of that, as far as the whole Nico thing goes, I talked to a couple buddies who are big Tennessee fans. Mike, if you've watched the show, the Shy Kid, pretty frequently, he appears with me. Mike is a big Tennessee fan. Our buddy Randy is also a huge Tennessee fan. And I think for Tennessee fans, this gives them a little bit of validation, because this is a kid that, Randy put it best, he over leveraged himself. And essentially what happens, for anybody who doesn't know, when all of these deals were getting signed with Carson Beck at Georgia, Cam Ward at Miami, there's a couple other quarterbacks that were pretty big name. They were getting fairly decent NIL amounts as far as getting money goes. And he felt that he deserved more. And he wanted a deal that totaled $4 million. Basically, Josh Heupel and a lot of the people for Tennessee are kind of sitting there, watching this. You want $4 million to be our starting quarterback. If anybody watched, honestly, a lot of the Tennessee games last year, they were a little shaky. They lost some games that they probably shouldn't have, and then they go into the playoffs against Ohio State, and they get ran out of the building. So if I'm Tennessee, I'm sitting here watching this, and then my quarterback comes up to me, not exactly doing great. Doesn't seem like he's in the greatest of attitudes, and says, "Hey, I want $4 million because I feel like I'm worth it, and I feel like I should earn more than that." So he kind of bets on himself. And to me, this is the other really weird part about all of this. So he decides to enter the transfer portal late spring because Tennessee says no. Josh Heupel did the right thing. He said, nobody's bigger than the team, not me, not any player. We're not going to do that. And overall, that makes a lot of sense. Don't want to overpay somebody and then potentially shortchange yourself later on. So he goes out and decides to test the waters. Well, Dan Lanning apparently came out and said, "Hey, he's looking." Now, I don't know if Dan Lanning would have potentially taken the risk of trying to get him. By the way, Dan Lanning runs Oregon. I don't think he would want to bring that into the culture and into the system as a whole. But he kind of let people know, hey, he's looking. Like, just letting you know he's looking. I know he kind of had a little bit of a connection to Lincoln Riley, connection to USC. I know he wanted to go back to California. But to me, there were so many other better landing spots that he could have landed to be the starting quarterback for a team. Even if it's only for a year, a couple years, they could have had the money. And I think people would have paid him for it, and he would have been so much better off. The fact that he goes to UCLA because he wants to go back home to California, when, again, if it was me, I would have gone to USC just because bigger brand, better coach with Lincoln Riley, better recruiting efforts. Again, if everything stays the way it is right now, they have the number one, if not a top 5 recruiting class next year. So, I mean, you're going to have talent around you, even if you don't do well this season, you're still going to have talent around you. But you go to the other school in LA and you expect to do what in the Big Ten exactly? Because you're going to have to deal with an Ohio State, even if they are retooling and rebuilding. And honestly, by the looks of it, Sunday or Saturday, they just retooled. You're going to beat them. You're going to beat a Michigan team that's also, retooling and rebuilding. You're going to beat a Penn State team who has basically brought everybody back and is still going to be rolling. And you still have to face Oregon. Like, you're going to beat all of them with UCLA. I don't think so, Nico. I'm just saying it was weird how that whole thing transpired. And I know for some Tennessee fans, I don't think they wish anything bad on him, but part of them, I think, to me, kind of had we told you not to do that. Like, you would have been much better off if you didn't. And he suffers his first defeat against the hand of the Utes, the UCLA Bruins' old Pac-12 rival. And of course, the last couple of games that happened Sunday and yesterday, we had Notre Dame go down to Miami, get upset by the Canes with Carson Beck, CJ Carr, 221 yards passing. We did see a little bit of a star in Malachi Tony start to form there in Miami. Carson Beck, he looked like he was rejuvenated. He looked happier down in Miami with this. It'll be interesting to see because, I mean, Notre Dame kept a lot of those pieces. Offensively, I think is going to be a little bit of a question with a true freshman at quarterback and CJ Carr. Just getting the rhythm, getting the flow of everything and whatnot. It'll probably take him a little bit. Now for Miami, the big thing that kind of hurt them last year, they did get a little bit cocky. They were winning games. Cam Ward was great. The offense was great. There's still a lot of questions on defense. I think the defense got better, but again, it's only week one. We'll have to see what they do in conference play. They do have the benefit. They don't have to face Clemson. They do have to face Florida State in conference. So again, they don't really have a whole lot of really tough opponents to face, but we'll have to see what they look like as it goes on. The other kind of big game, we had Virginia Tech and South Carolina. It ended up being a lot closer throughout the game than what probably anybody expected. South Carolina ultimately ends up pulling out the victory 24-11. Virginia Tech had a safety against South Carolina. They even got a field goal, so it was like 7-5 for a hot minute. Then they end up getting, or 8-5. Yeah. Then they end up kicking a field goal. It's like 8-10 at one point. It was a really weird scoring game. It seemed like it took a little bit for Lenore Sellers and Nick Harbor to finally get things rolling. They started out really good on that first drive. Virginia Tech made some adjustments and whatnot. Took South Carolina a little bit longer again to be able to make those adjustments and get back into the rhythm of things. But I mean, shout out to Virginia Tech. They're probably going to be a little bit better than what I expected. Again, I don't think they're going to be one of those teams that's going to be in kind of competition for the ACC. We'll have to see. But again, shout out to them for at least being able to give South Carolina a little bit of a run for their money. When I think a lot of us probably expected South Carolina to, run them out of the building. But again, it's the first week. It's probably a little bit hard for a lot of teams to get some of the rust off, especially when you're facing off against another Power 5 team who's supposed to be, of equal quality, if not better than you, or at least better than a lot of the group of 5 schools that some of these teams faced and ultimately just ended up, running out of their own buildings and whatnot. And then, of course, yesterday night's game, the big debacle, TCU at North Carolina drops 48 points on a Bill Belichick-led team. Only team in Bill Belichick's head coaching history to ever drop 48 points on him, both professionally or collegiately. North Carolina only able to put up 14 points. Gio Lopez, that first drive, North Carolina looked fantastic. I thought for sure with that first drive that it was going to be a lot closer than what it was. Ended up unfortunately not being. And it just seemed like that defense was not up to snuff for whatever reason. TCU was able to run all over that North Carolina Tar Heel defense. And TCU is going to definitely be feeling that. And again, another team that I feel like, depending on who they have to face, because I haven't really looked at TCU's schedule, could make a run for the Big 12. This is probably my favorite thing about college football. And it's my favorite thing about the Big 12 is it's really wide open. I feel like it's open for anybody's taking. Iowa State could have a chance. Utah could have a chance. Who knows? TCU could even have a chance. There's a lot of teams that I think realistically have a chance to make a run for that title. And to me, it's completely wide open. You could even throw Arizona State in there since they're the defending Big 12 champs. MJ, welcome in, ma'am, with her We Are, your Penn State Nittany Lions. Of course, had a pretty good thumping day against Nevada with a 46-11 win. So I know you're pretty ecstatic about that. I did watch a little bit of it, but I'll be honest, I was more interested in watching Alabama lose than anything, because at the end of the day, if Alabama loses, America wins. Just full honesty. I know a lot of Alabama fans are going to hate to hear that, but I'm just throwing it out there. But I am going to take a real quick break. When I come back, we'll talk about the NFL. We'll do a little bit of predictions and whatnot as far as what I think is going to happen as the first week of the season. Now, keep in mind, I don't follow the NFL as closely as I used to, but I still follow it pretty well. But nonetheless, we will take a real quick break. And when we come back, as soon as I find a good song that I want to throw out there.
Signed up to fight for freedom. What a price you had to pay. Picture in a helmet, missing family every day. Your Lady Liberty, dressed like G.I. Jane. Some scars we'll never see. She will never be the same. She's a mother, she's a daughter. She's a sister and a friend. Standing tall in that uniform until the very end. When Uncle Sam called, she signed that line to serve. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her. On that old dusty base with the meadows that shine, she's been to hell and back for the stars and the stripes. Your Lady Liberty, dressed like G.I. Jane, and some scars we'll never see, and she will never be the same. She's a mother, she's a daughter, she's a sister and a friend. Standing tall in that uniform until the very end. When Uncle Sam called, she signed that line to serve. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her. Yeah, yes. For the ones that didn't make it, we will pause and then we cry. We can still see their smile in every sunrise. She's a mother, she's a daughter, she's a sister and a friend. Standing tall in that uniform until the very end. When Uncle Sam called, she signed that line to serve. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you in part by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice and helping teach them how to podcast. Most importantly, letting veterans' voices be heard. So we are in the second half of the show. We're going to talk a little bit about the NFL and whatnot in the upcoming season. It starts on Thursday with the Cowboys versus the defending Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. MJ Cotia double gut, or that's right. The LSU Tigers getting the win against the other Tigers, the Clemson Tigers. But LSU is the real Death Valley, though, luckily enough. So obviously with Dallas, the big news that happened this past week, they traded Micah Parsons to Green Bay for really not a whole lot. They got 2 first-round picks and Kenny Clark, the argument being that they needed to stop the run, which is great, but now who's going to be the pass rush at the quarterback and whatnot? That question probably won't be answered. It might even be back like in the 2013, 2014 days with Rod Marinelli's defense, where essentially you had a bunch of quote unquote no names rushing the quarterback. They did fairly decent. But again, nobody that really stood out and made anything absolutely crazy. I don't expect Dallas to be that good this year. They have to fix their O-line. Zach Martin retired. They have a rookie coming in. The running game is going to be a big question. Now, obviously, passing-wise, if Dak can stay healthy with CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, it should be a fairly decent passing offense. But as far as the defense, the run game, and whatnot, and shutting that down, there's going to be a lot of questions that have to be answered. They go to Philadelphia. Philly is favored by 8.5. Philly's more likely going to win. I mean, it's the first night of the season. It's in Philly. Philly's got the momentum. They have the offensive line. They've got the defense. They've got just about everything that you could want and ask for, barring their offense just looking really terrible and just completely stuttering and missing. I would definitely expect Philly to win. Now, Dak does have a history of doing well against his divisional opponents, but last year Dallas was only able to put up, I think, 13 or 14 points against Philly in both games. Meanwhile, Philly was able to score, I think, 70 or 80 points combined against them. So it was not a pretty sight by no stretch of the imagination. So I'm going to take Philly in that one. Friday, we even have a game. We have a Friday night game, Kansas City at LA against the Chargers. Believe it or not, this is going to be on YouTube. It's going to take place in Brazil, 8 o'clock Eastern. I'm going to take Kansas City. I know it's a quote unquote home game for LA. It's not going to be. There's probably going to be a ton of Chiefs fans that travel down there. Now, I know realistically, the Chargers did retool. Their offensive line should be solid. Now, if I remember seeing correctly, I think Rashawn Slater might be out for the year due to injury, which if that's the case, that's going to leave a big question for the Chargers. Now, they did upgrade their running game with Najee Harris. Keenan Allen is back. They still have Lad McConkey. Justin Herbert's in another year under Harbaugh's system. So it should be competitive. But all honesty, until they truly beat Kansas City, it's hard for me to bet against the Chiefs, unfortunately. And then, of course, Sunday we have all the normal games. We have Tampa Bay at Atlanta. Tampa Bay is favored by 2.5. I'm going to take Tampa Bay. I think with Atlanta, with Michael Penix kind of coming into his second year, his first full year starting anyway. There's going to be a little bit of some questions. What does that chemistry look like? Now, I know Atlanta went and got defense in the draft, so are they able to combat up against Tampa Bay? But man, offensively for Tampa Bay, they have a ton of weapons. They've got Bucky Irving, Baker Mayfield's still there. You've got technically Chris Godwin is hurt, but he may or may not. I don't know if he'll be here for this game, but he's going to be a problem all season. You've still got Mike Evans. You got Emeka Ibuka that you drafted. You still have Trey McMillan. You've got a ton of wide receiver weapons that you're able to work with, and a fairly decent offensive line and a fairly decent defense too. So I'm gonna take Tampa Bay in this one, even though it's in Atlanta. Then Cincinnati goes to Cleveland. Cincy's favored by 4.5. I'm going to take Cincy, even though Joe Burrow tends to struggle in the beginning of the year. For whatever reason, he always struggles in those first couple of games. Offensively, again, the Bengals should be a juggernaut. You still have Jamar Chase. You still have T. Higgins. Offensive line is a big question. We even saw in the preseason, they were absolutely running around everywhere. But it'll be interesting to see how he's able to counteract that. And then honestly, what does Cincy's defense look like? But Cleveland leaves a lot more questions for me. What do they look like offensively? They did get Isaiah Bond as an undrafted free agent. He should be solid. I remember watching him at Texas and at Alabama. He's a great wide receiver. Nick Chubb is gone. Amari Cooper's gone. There's not a whole lot there. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel's the backup. Shador's the third string, so there might be some entertainment value there. Defensively, they paid Myles Garrett a ton of money, but it is a lot of questions. MJ, I appreciate that. I do. I appreciate that. It is. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the best season of the year so far. So I'm going to take Cincinnati in this. Miami comes here to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. Colts are favored by 1.5. I'm going to take Miami in this. I know if there's any Colts fans watching, they may or may not be a little bit salty with me at that. I just don't trust Daniel Jones. I don't trust him as the starting quarterback. I think it's weird the fact of you're starting him. And here's why I say this. Shout out to Mike that I work with. He brought up a really good point with this. If you think that you're going to, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this, because the organization is never going to admit this. The whole Shane Steichen is probably never going to admit this as a coach because he doesn't want to get fired, and I don't blame him. If you think that Danny Dimes potentially is going to put you in a better position, I don't necessarily know about that. I really don't. I know he's got the experience. I know people are going to argue, oh, he's a first-round quarterback. So is Zach Wilson. Obviously, he's not a first-round quarterback. You can even go as far back as Jamarcus Russell. He's a first-round quarterback. Not worth it. Johnny Manziel, first-round quarterback. Not worth it. Like, we've seen that time and time again. Yeah, these guys are first-round quarterbacks. They're not really doing anything that's going to be turning heads or doing anything crazy. So, to me, I don't expect Danny Dimes to do anything crazy. In all honesty, why not continue to give Anthony Richardson the shot? I mean, to me, he's going to win and lose about the same amount of games as Daniel Jones is. And again, giving more reps, giving more time, give him a chance to really have learned from his mistakes that he made last year of being too tired. He's obviously always injury prone. He just doesn't have a lot of experience. He didn't have a lot of experience in college. He started one season. He started 3 games his first year. He got hurt, and then he obviously had an off and on year last year after he got benched and whatnot. So give the kid at least one more year, see what you've got. And even if he does get hurt, okay, now we have a somewhat viable backup in Daniel Jones that we can use. What happens if Daniel Jones gets hurt? And then you put in AR, and then AR gets hurt. Now you got to move to the third string guy, Riley Leonard. Do you really trust Riley Leonard that much? And if that's the case, why don't you just make him the starter? It's going to sound weird. I know people probably aren't going to be a fan of it, but I'm just saying, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Put AR out there, Danny is your backup, and then put Riley Leonard is the third. But that's just me. Then you got Vegas going to New England. New England's 2.5-point favorite. I would take New England. Drake May obviously had a fantastic year last year. Vegas with Geno Smith. Obviously, they got Amari Cooper back. He's back in the building. I think New England, just with Mike Vrabel, how we've seen Vrabel teams coached and how well Drake May did, I'm going to take New England in this, but that's just me personally. And this is one of the games that they're actually favored in, and who knows, this might be New England football back a little bit. Don't know if they're going to make a playoff run, but they'll be back at least to get enough of a win against Vegas. Arizona travels to New Orleans. Arizona's a 6.5-point favorite. I'm going to take the Cardinals. The Saints are just an absolute mess. I will be really surprised if the Saints win 2 to 3 games this year. Just full transparent honesty. I remember watching Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma, especially that first year under Lincoln Riley and whatnot. Post Kyler Murray. And everybody thought, man, he's going to be a top round pick. He struggles throughout the year. Caleb Williams steps in. He struggled a little bit. They kind of bounce back and forth. He felt kind of, disrespected by Oklahoma, travels and transfers to South Carolina. Has a somewhat decent year, leads him to a couple big victories and whatnot. Ends up getting drafted by the Saints, and he ends up fighting with Tyler Shuck for the starting job, which to me that's a big worry. You've been in the NFL for a while. You've had a year to learn under a system, and you're really competing with a rookie, and it's apparently that close. That's either an indictment on you, or it's a big shout out to Tyler Shuck, one of the two, for whoever's going to be the starting quarterback. But Spencer Rattler's been named it. There's not a whole lot to work with in New Orleans. They have to retool the offensive line. Weapons-wise, they're not exactly the sexiest other than Chris Olave. I know Alvin Kamara is still down there, but we haven't heard that name in a hot minute as far as doing anything to make a huge difference. The defense is still there, but it's older. And obviously Tyrann Mathieu just retired, so they're going to have to find somebody to replace in the secondary. They traded away Marshawn Lattimore. So I don't have a whole lot of high hopes for New Orleans, full transparency. Pittsburgh goes to the New York to take on technically New Jersey to take on the Jets. So Aaron Rodgers takes on his old team, as well as Justin Fields takes on his old team. Honestly, just because it's the Jets, I'm going to take Pittsburgh. Even though I'm not a huge fan of Rodgers, I don't expect big things to happen out of Rodgers this year. It's hard for me to say that, it's hard for me to say that Justin Fields is going to be able to pull out a win against a really stacked defense at Pittsburgh. And because offensively, I just don't see them being able to move the ball very well. I mean, they have the talent. They've got Braylon Allen. They've got Breece Hall. They've got Garrett Wilson. They have Alan Lazard. They have a shot, but I have a lot of questions, but I'll take Pittsburgh for the win on that one. We have a really good NFC East matchup, actually. We have New York going to Washington. Washington 6.5-point favorite. I'm going to take Janie Daniels and the Commanders. I don't really trust a Russell Wilson-led team going into Washington. Jaden's coming in, more chemistry. He's still got Terry McLaurin. He's still got Debo. They retooled. New York completely just, they gutted themselves out and have basically started over from scratch. I think they're in a better position than they were. They've got Russ as a starter. They've got Jackson Dart as the second. Then they have Jameis Winston as the third string. So, they're set as far as that goes. But again, I have a lot of questions as far as the running back goes. Wide receiver, they still have Malik Neighbors. That's really about it. This is really, to me, Jalen Hyatt's Jalen Hyatt's year in game to really step up and prove that, hey, I'm the number 2 wide receiver here, and I can prove it, but we'll see. Carolina goes down to Jacksonville to take on Trevor Lawrence and the Jags, as well as the new coach of the Jaguars and whatnot. I'm going to take the Jags in this. I mean, experience, they've got the home game, they've got more talent. We'll have to see if Bryce Young is able to carry over the magic that he had in Carolina after getting benched and kind of, rekindling a little bit of a spirit after that. But I'm gonna go with the home team in that one, just personally. Then you got Tennessee at Denver. I'm gonna take Denver. I know Cam Ward was the first overall pick. There's not a lot to look forward to in Tennessee. There's not a lot of upside down there. It's going to be a rough day for Cam Ward, especially against that Denver defense, who got a lot of pieces, a lot of leadership from the San Francisco 49ers in free agency. So I'm going to take Denver pretty easily. The spread's 7.5. I'm going to take that. San Francisco travels up to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. I'm going to take San Fran. And now they are injured pretty badly. But I have a lot of questions. Is Sam Darnold truly able to lead a Seahawks team? Not as good offensive line. Yes, he has Jackson Smith and Jigba. I can't remember the other wide receiver. I felt like they got another decent wide receiver, though. And Seattle's defense, what does that look like? So, I mean, technically still talent-wise, San Francisco should take it. I think, to me, better quarterback play than out of Sam Darnold. I mean, it's hard to not be great when you're Sam Darnold with, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and whatnot in Minnesota. So I'm going to go with San Francisco over Seattle personally. Detroit goes to Green Bay with newly acquired pass rusher Micah Parsons. I don't know if he is truly going to be in the game or not. I keep hearing reports he's got a fairly bad back. He's got a little bit of issues, so I don't know if he's going to be there. Detroit might take a little bit of a step back because now it's going to be the first game without Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn as coordinators, but we'll have to see how it works. Preseason did not look great. I know a lot of people criticize him for that. You don't show off your hand in preseason because the preseason games don't matter. I mean, if they look bad, oh well, that's just the second strings. It's just the backup. It doesn't really matter. You don't really need to go out and win. It's just to evaluate to see what you've got. Right now, they have Green Bay as 2.5-point favorites. I'm going to take Detroit. I feel like with the experience that the team has, the camaraderie and the chemistry that the team has, they've really been riding high for a good couple years now as far as being back-to-back NFC North winners. I'm going to go with technically the upset, and I'm going to take Detroit. Then you've got the Texans going to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. I'm going to take the Rams. I'm going to take the Rams. They have Devontae Adams. They have Puka Nacua. They have a very young, solid defense. It's Sean McVay. They're in California. Obviously, the Texans and CJ Stroud had a little bit of a sophomore slump last year, and they've already got some injuries hitting them, but they got rid of one of their best offensive linemen, which was a little bit weird and a big question mark. And LA's favored by 2.5. I would take that. I would take the Rams winning by 3 at least. Then probably one of the biggest matchups to end the day. You've got Baltimore going to Buffalo. Huge matchup. Buffalo's favored by 1.5. Honestly, I think I would take Baltimore in this. They've still got Derrick Henry. They've still got Lamar. And until, to me, Buffalo can really prove that they can win. And when I say that, I'm not saying Buffalo can't win against big teams. They've struggled against the Chiefs. They haven't really been able to beat them. The Ravens, I feel like them and the Ravens are really like equal. Like if you had the Chiefs at 1A, the Bills and Ravens are like at 1B, and they're just duking it out to see who can truly be that 1B spot to move in to try to potentially take on the Chiefs. The Ravens just as a whole are stacked. To me, I think they're just better overall offensively and defensively. That defense is completely stacked with a ton of good players. To me, I would take Baltimore in the quote unquote upset again. They only had the Bills favored by 1.5. So to me, that's more of it's kind of a toss up. We'll just give it to Buffalo because it's in Buffalo type of thing. But that's my interpretation of it. And then the other game that's kind of the same way, that's going to be, to me, pretty exciting on Monday night. You've got Minnesota going to Chicago to take on the Bears. Minnesota is technically favored by 1.5. I think I am going to take Chicago in this. A little bit of bias. I'm going to take Chicago. I think Ben Johnson in that offense is going to do wonders. I think for Minnesota, again, I got all sorts of hate about this on TikTok, and it's fine. To me, I have Minnesota losing because I have not seen enough from JJ McCarthy to really trust if he can do it. Now I've had a ton of Michigan fans, I've had a ton of Minnesota Vikings fans, I've had a ton of Minnesota Viking Michigan fans say this kid can do it. Harbaugh believes in him. He's had two of the best coaches in the world. He's had Harbaugh, he's had Kevin O'Connell. I don't disagree. He's had two great coaches. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. And again, one of the biggest takes and one of the biggest questions I've had, they didn't have him throw a whole lot in the national title. Biggest argument, he didn't really have to because you had Donovan Edwards, you had Blake Corum, and you had one of the best offensive lines in the country for the last 3 years that he was there, and a phenomenal defense. Didn't have to throw. All he had to do is just hand the ball off. I 100% agree. What does that look like in the NFL, though? Minnesota's offense is better. If they retooled and reshored up their offensive line, what does that look like as far as cohesion? Can they stay healthy throughout the year? Aaron Jones is going to be a solid running back. He's a little bit older, but he's not the dynasticity of a Donovan Edwards or a Blake Corum. He's just not, and they don't have that second 1-2 punch to go along with it. Now, yes, he still has Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison is suspended, so he doesn't have him to start out. They do have Adam Thielen back, so they get him some experience, a guy that knows the system, knows the city, everything like that, and they still have TJ Hawkinson. So again, Minnesota has a chance. They have a chance to be really talented and really special. Not denying that by no stretch of the imagination. I still have a lot of questions, and it still leaves me with a lot of doubt. Just throwing it out there. So I'm going to take the Bears in the win. A little bit of the quote-unquote upset, but it's in Chicago. It's going to be rocking. I think Caleb in his second year starting, I'm not going to say necessarily better tools around him, but just overall better, more positive culture, more shored up offensive line because just what they went and got in free agency, what they got in the draft and whatnot, and just how Ben Johnson runs his offense. The defense should also be better and whatnot. I'm going to go with Chicago in the quote unquote upset, but that's just me, and I got to rock with the Bears. MJ True, haters going to hate the truth of awareness. They do. And here's what's really funny that I want to say real quick before I end the show. I always laugh because of the comments I get, like some of the hate comments and whatnot. Like I posted my own top 25 before the official poll was released. The amount of hate that I used to get for it. Oh my goodness, the amount of hate. That's the funny part that people don't understand about sports, about politics, about anything. It's an opinion. And it's okay that we have different opinions. It's okay that we do not agree. It's okay that we disagree. That's perfectly fine. People are going to twist that. People are going to argue it. I'm not going to go into a TED Talk soap opera box of that. But that's okay. That's what makes America cool. That's what makes us awesome. We have different opinions, and that's okay. It's an opinion. It's not a fact. That's not set in stone. People are going to believe what they want to believe. People think what they want to think. That's perfectly okay. I'm going to think and believe what I want to think, and that's okay. Because we have a difference of opinions, and that's all they are is opinions. And opinions are like a-holes. Everybody's got one, and they all stink. Just saying. But appreciate y'all. Love y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in. We will see y'all next week with more college football, more NFL. Everybody have a great night, and please tune in to more shows here on MBR with other great veteran voices and other great veteran hosts. Everybody have a good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.